You won't believe what they found behind that famous green door in Kensington. For years, the world only saw the lights, the outfits, the thunder of stadiums. But when the lock finally clicked at Garden Lodge, the hidden haven of Freddie Mercury, friends walked into a private universe so vivid, so personal, it felt like stepping straight into the singer's heartbeat. Now, before we open that door together, let's rewind to where the story really begins. Long before arenas roared his name, Freddie Mercury was Farrokh Bulsara, born on September 5, 1946, in Stone Town, Zanzibar, back when the island was still under British rule. His parents, Bomi and Jair Bulsara, were part of the Parsi community with deep roots in western India, tracing back to the city once called Bulsar, today's Valsad, in Gujarat. They practiced Zoroastrianism and carried those traditions wherever work and life took them. Balmy worked as a cashier for the colonial office, but fate had something far louder in store for their son. People love to talk about those extra teeth, 4 added incisors that gave Freddie Mercury a wider jaw and, as he liked to say with a wink, a built-in megaphone. Whether medical fact or rock mythology, it became part of his legend, nature adjusting the architecture of his mouth for music. Though Zanzibar was home, most of his childhood played out in India. At 7, he moved to live with relatives and began piano lessons. A year later, he was sent to St. Peter's School in Panchgani, near Bombay, Mumbai. There, a shy boy with quick hands and quicker ears started to bloom. By day, he collected stamps like his father. Fun fact: that stamp album would one day sit in London's Postal Museum. By night, the kid was all rock and roll. At 12, he started a school band called the Hectics, pounding out covers of Elvis Presley, Cliff Richard, and Little Richard. Friends swore he could hear a song once on the radio and then sit down and play it perfectly on the piano, as if he'd rehearsed it in another life. Somewhere in those years, Farrokh tried on a new name and kept it, Freddie. The music sharpened, the persona started to take shape, but history had its own dramatic entrance planned. In 1964, the Zanzibar Revolution erupted. The violence forced the Bulsara family to flee, and they landed in England. Far from tropical shores, deep into the gray sprawl of Feltham, Middlesex, England became the turning point. Freddie studied first at Isleworth Polytechnic and then at Ealing Art College, graduating in 1969 with a diploma in graphic design. Those skills would come in handy later when he crafted a royal-looking emblem for a certain band crest. But before crowns and crests, there was hustle. He worked as a baggage handler at Heathrow, hauled luggage by day, and hauled dreams by night. He sold vintage scarves and second-hand Edwardian clothes at Kensington Market with his friend Roger Taylor, not as the singer the world would worship, but as the crazy mate who always knew where the fun was. On stage, the switch flipped. In 1969, he fronted a Liverpool outfit called Ibex, later renamed Wreckage. Drenched in Jimi Hendrix-inspired blues, he even lived above a pub on Penny Lane for a spell, soaking up the city's music spirit like a sponge. When Wreckage dissolved, he tried again with Sour Milk Sea. To a practical mind, these might have looked like false starts. To Freddie, they were rehearsal, a sharpening stone for the blade he was about to wield. By 1970, the pieces clicked. Freddie Mercury joined forces with Brian May and Roger Taylor, who'd been playing in a band called Smile. In 1971, John Deacon completed the circle. A band needed a name, and Freddie pushed for one that raised eyebrows and chins in equal measure. Queen. Regal, bold, deliberate, a little provocative. That duality mirrored him perfectly. Around this time, Freddie officially adopted the surname Mercury, an identity as mythic as his destiny. And yes, he designed that iconic Queen crest before their debut album. Lions for John and Roger, a crab for Brian, fairies for Freddie, a Virgo, a crown tucked inside a colossal Q, and a phoenix guarding the whole thing. The message wasn't subtle. this band would rule. People often forget that Freddie Mercury spoke in a comfortable baritone, but when he sang, he soared into tenor territory with a willpower that made steel bend. As a songwriter, he loved adventure as much as melody. He gave us Bohemian Rhapsody, Somebody to Love, We Are the Champions, Don't Stop Me Now. Songs that feel like they flew in from different planets, but somehow shared one heartbeat. He could build labyrinths, shifting keys, choirs of harmonies, sudden left turns, and the next minute throw down a bare-bones rockabilly tune like Crazy Little Thing Called Love. He joked he could barely read music, yet he'd sit at the piano and just summon. Instinct over instruction, magic over manual. And then there was the stage. Freddie Mercury didn't just perform. He took command like a ringmaster of thunder and light. He teased, he strutted, he played the crowd like a grand instrument. David Bowie once suggested that Freddie didn't merely join the theater of rock, he pushed it right over the edge. Brian May would say Freddie could reach the last person in the farthest seat and pull them into his orbit with a single glance, a single note. The moment that sealed this truth forever came on July 13th, 1985, at Live Aid. 20 minutes at Wembley Stadium turned into the most replayed masterclass in showmanship history. Jeans, a white tank top, a microphone on a broken stand, and 72,000 people clapping in unison. That sustained a cappella call and response? The note heard round the world. A year later, in August 1986, Freddie Mercury and Queen played Knebworth Park, nearly 200,000 fans filling the field like an ocean of faces. Draped in a scarlet robe, crown held aloft, Freddie closed with God Save the Queen. A week earlier, he'd told Brian May quietly that he might not be doing this much longer. The curtain was floating down, even if the roar hadn't faded yet. Now, here's where the contradictions shine. On stage, pure fire. Off stage, a puzzle of opposites. A gifted pianist who gradually gave up the bench so he could roam the stage. A perfectionist who loved chaos at the right moment. A showman who could, in private, be shy, watchful, almost guarded. He even slung a guitar on occasion. Crazy Little Thing Called Love proved he could pull that off too. As for romance, the world tends to flatten his story into a single label. Real life rarely fits a label. Freddie Mercury loved men. He also had significant relationships with women. There were actresses and models in the mix, and one woman who would become the anchor of his life. Her name was Mary Austin. They met in 1969 when she worked at Biba. He was 24, charming but broke, selling clothes at a market stall with Roger Taylor. She was 19, grounded, steady. They moved in together. She paid the rent while he chased the dream no one else could quite see. Fame arrived and Freddie proposed, but the engagement couldn't survive the truth he finally spoke. Mary told him plainly he wasn't bisexual. He was gay in her view. Their romance ended, but their bond didn't. Freddie called Mary his common-law wife, left her garden lodge and half his fortune in his will, and trusted her with his ashes, whose resting place remains her quiet secret. There were others. Barbara Valentin, a flamboyant Austrian actress who matched Freddie's blaze during his Munich years. Winfried Winnie Kirchberger, a German restaurateur whose ring Freddie wore. And most enduringly, Jim Hutton, an Irish hairdresser whom Freddie called his husband. Jim gave him a gold band that stayed on Freddie's finger to the end. For 7 years, Jim stood beside him, in the laughter, in the work, in the silence when words grew heavy. The parties were as legendary as the songs. Queen's 1978 jazz album Bash in New Orleans. People still trade stories about that night. Outrageous, decadent, the kind of excess only rock and roll could afford. There are tales of naked waiters, wrestlers in bathtubs, dwarfs carrying trays, a circus of the surreal that followed Freddie like a comet tail. And when HI5 darkened the horizon, he didn't immediately slow down. After his diagnosis, he turned his 41st birthday into a thunderclap in Ibiza. Hundreds of guests, rivers of champagne, fireworks that glowed across the Balearic sky. The tab? Let's just say it broke a few glasses, 232 to be precise. He moved in circles, where royalty brushed shoulders with rock royalty. One story has Princess Diana slipping into London's Royal Vauxhall Tavern, disguised by Freddie, jacket, hat, sunglasses. The world's most recognizable woman blending into a packed night like a mischievous secret. In another orbit, Freddie and Michael Jackson tried recording together in 1983. The session stalled. Freddie joked about a llama in the studio. Jackson reportedly bristled at Freddie's excess. The music didn't stick, but the stories did. Through all this, one name looms like a shadow in his timeline: Paul Prenter. Prenter came into Freddie's life in the mid-70s, became part of his inner circle, and later served as his manager. Rumors swirled about the nature of their relationship. Some said lovers, others insisted it was strictly professional. For a while, things looked steady, but by 1982, tensions were high. Queen's album Hot Space leaned hard into funk and disco. Brian May and Roger Taylor disliked the direction and blamed Prenter for pushing it. The record underperformed. The rift widened. Prenter stayed on a bit longer, but loyalty in the music business has a fraying point. In 1987, Paul Prenter sold a story to a tabloid exposing private details about Freddie Mercury's life and his relationship with Jim Hutton. Friends believe Prenter felt thrown aside and was himself dealing with illness. Bitterness and desperation collided, and he crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. The betrayal cut deep. Freddie's trust tightened. The walls at Garden Lodge rose a little higher. And that brings us back to the house behind the green door. Garden Lodge, 1 Logan Place. Freddie Mercury bought the Georgian-style property in 1980 for around £500,000. The moment Mary Austin and Freddie stepped inside, she felt it. A place of peace, a true artist's home. But peace at Garden Lodge didn't mean dour or plain. Walk in, and saffron-yellow walls warmed you like stage lights. The drawing room stretched high and airy across 2 floors. In it sat the piano, where Bohemian Rhapsody had once taken shape. Up the stairs, mirrored dressing rooms, where outfits and mustaches transformed a man into a monarch of performance. And beyond the glass, a garden that looked like a poem. Magnolia trees, water features, sculpted topiary, the serenity of Japan transplanted into Kensington. Freddie had helped design it, which makes perfect sense. He didn't just make songs, he made spaces. For decades after his death, Mary Austin kept Garden Lodge almost exactly as he'd left it, like a time capsule with a heartbeat. The bar where he laughed with friends, the music room that opened onto the quiet outdoors, the robe he might drape around his shoulders before a last look at the garden. The home became a sanctuary and a museum intertwined. Inside those walls, Freddie Mercury lived the final act of his life with a small circle he trusted: his assistant Peter Freestone, his partner Jim Hutton, and Mary. By the Brit Awards in 1990, when the world saw him on stage with Brian, Roger, and John, it was clear to the people closest to him that something was wrong. Still, he kept his health private. He didn't want pity. He didn't want the circus. He wanted to work. Business as usual, he said, right up to the last recording sessions, right up to the line where music meets breath. On November 23, 1991, a public statement went out via publicist Roxy Mead. Freddie Mercury confirmed he had tested positive for HIV and was living with AIDS. It was shocking, not simply for the news, but for the timing, the day before he died. In that era, AIDS was cloaked in fear and stigma. For Freddie to say it clearly, in his own words, mattered. On November 24, 1991, he died at Garden Lodge of bronchial pneumonia brought on by AIDS at 45 years old. His bandmates later said they never pressed him for details. Some things remained unspoken among the 4 of them. Years afterward, Brian May recalled how Freddie feared that if the truth got out, his life would become a spectacle. He chose privacy, chose music, chose to hold the story in his own hands until the very end. Even after the story didn't stop at the door. Nearly 2 decades later in 2010, Jim Hutton died after a battle with cancer at age 60. Mary Austin, the keeper of Garden Lodge, guarded the space and the memories. And then, for the first time, the wider world got to glimpse the personal universe Freddie had curated. Thousands of items, more than 1,500, went under the hammer at Sotheby's to benefit AIDS charities. Handwritten lyrics, stage costumes, artworks he'd collected with obsession, and the replica saint. Edward's crown with the velvet robe he wore during the 1986 Magic Tour. There was even the green door itself, scrawled with decades of fan love, messages layered like a chorus. When the bidding stopped, that door fetched an eye-popping sum, more than £400,000. Imagine that, the price of an entire house in 1980, paid for a portal that had once simply kept the world outside. So what did they find behind the green door? Not scandal, not secrets waiting to explode. They found the human being behind the supernova, the playlists of a collector, the quiet humor of a man who left little jokes for himself in costume rails and notebooks, the tenderness of a caretaker who phoned home to talk to his cats, the discipline of an artist who could argue over harmony lines for hours and still toast with friends at the end of the night. They found, in short, Freddie Mercury. Not the cutout figure, not the magazine myth, but the person whose love of life made the songs burn so bright. And as for Garden Lodge's future, well, houses change hands. Memories don't. Whether the next owner is a fan, a collector, or someone who simply fancies a very expensive slice of Kensington, that place will always hum with the same silent chorus: saffron walls, polished piano keys, magnolias in bloom. A sanctuary built by a showman who knew that even the wildest lives need a quiet room. Before we close the door, I'm curious. What's your first Freddie Mercury memory? Was it a song on the radio during a late-night drive? A clip of Live Aid that made your hair stand on end? Or maybe a lyric that felt just for a second like it was written for you? Drop your story. I'd love to read it. And if you want more deep dive tales about icons who changed music and culture, stick around. Tap like if this hit you in the feels. Share it with someone who sings Bohemian Rhapsody way too loud in the car. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now, take one last look at that green door and imagine it swinging open. The music's still there, waiting.